Hi, students, let's get started with the subject Social Science, Chapter 4. New Beginnings for Cities and States. The kingdom shall be protected by fortifying the capital and the towns at the frontiers. The land should not only be capable of sustaining the population but also outsiders in times of calamities. It should be beautiful, being endowed with cultivable land, mines, timber forests, elephant forests, and good pastures rich in cattle. It should not depend only on rain for water. It should have good roads and waterways. It should have a productive economy with a wide variety of commodities. Koilya, Arthashastra. Fig. 4.1. Ruins of a major structure at Jagiha, modern-day Rajgir in Bihar, when it was the capital of the Magad Mahjanpada. Let us recall that in the early 2nd millennium BCE, that is, over a few centuries after 2000 BCE, the Indus Harappan Sindhu Saraswat civilization, which we call India's first urbanization, disintegrated. Some of its cities were abandoned. In others, some people continued living there, but reverting to a rural or village lifestyle. They had to, since all the components of the Harappan urban order had disappeared: elaborate structures, both private and public, crowded streets and busy markets, different communities with specialized occupations. Metalsmiths, potters, builders, weavers, craftspeople, and so on, a writing system, a sanitation system, the presence of an administration, and, behind it all, a larger state structure with a ruling class at the head. And for a whole millennium, urban life remained absent from India, though there may have been a few towns here and there in North India. Fig. 4.2. The fertile Gangetic plains helped the Mahjanapadas to grow and prosper. Indeed, there were important regional cultures, which we need not study here. Then, in the 1st millennium BCE, a vibrant new phase of urbanization began in the Ganga plains, parts of the Indus or Sindhu basin and neighboring regions, gradually spreading to other parts of the subcontinent. How do we know this? Mainly from two sources: 1. Archaeological excavations that have confirmed the existence of those ancient urban centers, and 2. Ancient literature describing them. Late Vedic, Buddhist, and Jain literatures are full of references to these new urban centers. This new phase is often called India's second urbanization, which, incidentally, has continued right up to today. Let us see how this phase emerged. Janpadas and Mahjanapadas. Towards the end of the 2nd millennium BCE, regional cultures gradually reorganized themselves in North India. As people formed clans or groups, probably sharing a common language and common customs, each clan came to be associated with a territory or Janpada led by a Arevit Macron Jevit Macron or ruler. Janpada is a Sanskrit word which means where the people, Jana, have set foot, Pada, comma, that is, have settled down. The Janpadas grew as trade networks expanded and connected them. By the 8th or 7th centuries BCE, some of those early states had merged together. The resulting bigger units were known as Mahjanapadas. Although the texts have different lists of them, the more frequent list gives the names of 16 Mahjanapadas, extending from Gandhara in the northwest to Anga in the east and to Ashmaka in central India, close to the Godavari River. See map. There may have been a few more, along with some smaller Janpadas continuing independently. Think about it. Ashoka, in his edicts, tells the story of the Kalinga War. He could have chosen not to mention it and maintain his image as a peaceful, benevolent king for future generations. Why do you think he admitted to this destructive war? The map, Fig. 4.3, shows the Mahajanapadas capitals. Most were fairly large, well-fortified cities, with a moat running outside the fortifications as further defense. Often, the gateways through the rampart walls would be deliberately kept narrow, so guards may control the movement of people and goods entering or leaving the city. It is fascinating to note that most of those ancient capitals continue to be living cities today, modern cities that are often 2,500 years old. Early democratic traditions, each Janpada had an assembly or council called Sabha or Samiti, where matters concerning the clan would be discussed. Remember, from the chapter on India's cultural roots, that the words Sabha and Samiti first appear in the Vedas, India's most ancient texts. We may assume that most of the members were elders in the clan. The Aryavat Macron Jayavat Macron was not expected to rule independently or arbitrarily. Fig. 4.3. Map of the 16 Mahajanapadas. Note that their borders are approximate. A good ruler was supposed to take the advice from those assemblies apart from the ministers and administrators. Indeed, according to some texts, an incompetent ruler could be removed by the assembly. Of course, while such mentions are significant, it does not mean that this was an established law. Let us remember that the data we have for such remote periods is incomplete. In their political systems, the Mahajanapadas expanded the basic principles of the Janpadas. Some were, in effect, monarchies in the sense that the Aryavat Macron Jayavat Macron was the ultimate authority, supported by ministers and an assembly of elders. His position was hereditary in the sense that a Aryavat Macron Jayavat Macron would usually be the son of the previous one. The king would collect taxes or revenue, maintain law and order, get impressive fortifications built around their capital, and maintain an army to defend the territory or wage war with neighboring ones, as the case may be. Magad, located in part of today's Bihar, Kosala, in part of today's Uttar Pradesh, and Avanti, in part of today's Madhya Pradesh, were among the most powerful such states. However, at least two Mahajanapadas, Vajji or Vijji, and the neighboring Mall had a different system. The Sabha or Samiti had more power and took important decisions through discussion and, if necessary, through vote. Surprisingly, this included the selection of the Aryavat Macron Jayavat Macron. This means that those Mahajanapadas, which were called Gas or Sanghas, were not monarchies. Their functioning might be called democratic. Since members of the assembly were the ones to select the ruler and take major decisions. In fact, scholars have often called them early republics, as they are indeed one of the earliest such systems in the world. Fig. 4.4. Ruins of a complex at Coimb, capital of the Vatsa Mahajanapada. More innovations. The age of the Janpadas and Mahajanapadas was an age of profound change, which would impact Indian civilization until present times. In the chapter, India's Cultural Roots in Grade 6, we saw the emergence of several new schools of thought, late Vedic, Buddhist, Jain in particular, and their respective literatures. Those schools disseminated their teachings and literature through scholars, monks and nuns traveling across India or people undertaking pilgrimages. Indian art also underwent a renewal. It will blossom in the age of empires. Urbanization does not happen without technologies. Let us remember that the Harappan civilization mastered copper and bronze metallurgy. Now, in this second urbanization, a major shift in technology involved iron metallurgy. In several regions of India, the techniques of extracting and shaping iron were actually perfected from the early 2nd millennium BCE, but it took a few centuries for iron to become a part of daily life. By the late 2nd millennium BCE, iron tools had become widespread, facilitating agriculture on a bigger scale. Iron also made better weapons than bronze, lighter and sharper, swords, spears, arrows, shields, etc. As it happens, there is some evidence of warfare between neighboring Mahajanapadas. How frequent or how intense it was, of course, is impossible to tell. Such military campaigns, but occasionally alliances too, give rise to new kingdoms and empires, which we will turn to later in our journey. Another innovation was the first use of coins in India, made necessary by growing trade. Very soon, coins were exchanged across different regions and even with other parts of the world. The first Indian coins were made of silver, a soft metal into which symbols could be punched. They are called punch-marked coins. Later, coins of copper, gold and other metals were also made. Generally, a Mahajanpada issued its own coins, but coins from neighboring regions were used as well as exchanged in trade. The Vara JTI system. We saw earlier how human societies grew more complex with the rise of civilization. Whenever this happens, a society organizes itself in several groups based on class, occupation, or some other criteria. For instance, there could be different groups concerned with governance, administration, religion, education, trade, town planning, farming, crafts, arts, and all kinds of other professions. Fig. 4.5. A panel of the Sanchi STPA depicting a smithy or metal workshop where different workers bring firewood, water, stoke the fire, beat the iron, etc. Fig. 4.6. A few punch-marked coins from various ancient cities of North India. In an ideal society, all those groups would complement each other and work in harmony. But most of the time, these divisions also lead to inequalities. Some groups acquire more wealth, power, or influence than others. In other words, while equality is an ideal that human societies have often aspired to, very few, if any, have ever achieved it. In India, the society was organized in a twofold system. One category was the JTI, a group or community of people with a specific professional occupation closely tied to their livelihood. The skills that defined a particular JTI, for instance, skill in agriculture, metallurgy, commerce, or any craft, was generally transmitted from generation to generation. Often, a JTI would get further subdivided into sub-JTS, each of which developed customs and traditions of its own, for instance concerning marriage, rituals, or food habits. Along with the JTI, there is another category, that of Vara, a concept that emerged from Vedic texts. There were 4 Varas. Brahmins were engaged in preserving and spreading knowledge, and in the performance of rituals, Kshatriyas were expected to defend the society and the land, and to engage in warfare if necessary. Vaishyas were supposed to increase the society's wealth through occupations of trade, business, or agriculture. Finally, Shudras were the artisans, craftspeople, workers, or servants. Don't miss out. You may have heard the English word caste. It comes from a Portuguese word, casta, as Portuguese travelers to India in the 16th century CE tried to make sense of Indian society. While a few scholars consider caste to refer to Varas, most take it to apply to JTS, yet others consider caste to refer to the whole Vara JTI system. There is historical evidence, both in texts and inscriptions, that in the early period individuals and communities changed their professional occupations if circumstances demanded. For instance, a long drought or some natural calamity could force a community of farmers to migrate to a city and take up other occupations, or some Brahmins would turn to trade or even military activities. This complex system structured Indian society, organized its activities, including economic ones, and therefore gave it some stability. In time, however, the system became rigid and led to inequalities and discrimination towards the lower JTS or some communities excluded from the Varajti system. This process will be studied in a higher grade. The Varajti system has had a deep impact on Indian society, and generations of scholars have studied its countless aspects. There is a broad agreement that the system was significantly different, more flexible, in particular, in earlier periods, and became more rigid with the passage of time, in particular during the British rule in India. Let us also keep in mind that while Varajti has been an important mechanism at work in Indian society, it is not the only one, and there have been many others, some of which we will explore later, especially in the theme, our cultural heritage and knowledge traditions. Think about it, inequalities within society can exist in many forms. Have you encountered any incident where you or anyone you know might have been made to feel different from others? Do you think equality is desirable in a society? If so, why? Have you come across people or initiatives that lessen inequalities? Developments elsewhere in India. In this first millennium BCE, important communication routes opened up for purposes of trade, pilgrimage, military campaigns, etc. Two routes became widely used and are often mentioned in the literature, the Uttarpatha and the Dakipta. The first connected the northwest regions to the Ganga plains all the way to eastern India. The second started from Kaum, near Prayagraj, then a capital of one of the Mahajanapadas, and crossed the Vindhya range of hills to proceed all the way south. Fig. 4.7 Shishupalgarh, today a suburb of Bhubaneswar, first excavated in 1948. One of the gateways into the city, through the fortifications, the moat, full of water, is visible outside the gateway. Notice the narrowing in the gateway, for control of movement of people and goods. We will return to these routes when we explore the formation of empires in India. Many lateral roads also connected with other parts of India, especially the important ports on the western and eastern coasts, which were vibrant centers of trade. In the eastern region, major cities emerged, such as Shishupalgarh, today's Shishupalgarh, part of Bhubaneswar, which was the capital of the Kalinga region and followed a strict square ground plan, with imposing fortifications and broad streets. In the subcontinent's southern regions, cities began emerging from about 400 BCE, although recent excavations claim to find some signs of commercial activities going further back. Around this time, three kingdoms emerged: the Cholas, the Cheras and the Nyas. Fig. 4.8. Timeline covering the period from 1900 BCE to 300 BCE. Fig. 4.9. Shell and gemstones industries at the site of Kodumnal, near Erode, Tamil Nadu. Apart from archaeological evidence, the most ancient Tamil literature mentions those kingdoms and several of their kings. Because the southern regions are rich in resources such as precious and semi-precious stones, gold, and spices, they profitably traded not only with the rest of India but also with kingdoms and empires overseas. By 300 or 200 BCE, almost the entire subcontinent, including regions in the northeast, was one vibrant interconnected land. Goods and culture traveled from region to region, and often beyond India to parts of Central and Southeast Asia. About the same time, the Mahajanapadas ceased to exist, leaving the place to fresh developments that were going to reshape India. Before we move on, from the end of the second millennium BCE, Janpadas rose in parts of north and central India. They were smaller states with the Aravat Macron Javat Macron at the head taking counsel from an assembly of elders. The 16 Mahajanapadas were the first organized states of the first millennium BCE. They witnessed the second urbanization of India, which spread in all directions from the Ganga region all the way to South India. By 300 BCE or so, the Mahajanapadas ceased to exist. In the same period, a vast network of roads connected north and south, east and west, and eventually all regions of the subcontinent. People, goods, ideas and teachings traveled along all those roads. Thanks for watching.